were gradually decreasing in numbers. The identity of the Ainu as a people was faced with extinction.
Yeah, I think I have to stop now. I still have a few minutes. If there are any questions, I'm glad to hear that.
In the late 1930s and early 1940s, there were efforts by the Japanese government to present the Korean language and the languages of Okinawa and the surrounding islands as dialects of Japanese. Was a similar effort made to present the Ainu language as a dialect?
Yeah, but as you can see, the 1930s and 1940s, the number of Ainu-speaking people has already decreased significantly. So I think that, I'm not aware of Japanese government declaring that to the Ainu people, but I don't know whether it was of use if there are so few Ainu speakers already at the time. But linguistically speaking, Ainu differs significantly from Japanese. Well, maybe that you can say that also for Taiwanese and Korean foods. No, I'm not aware of that.
So now in Japan you have these Ainu protection laws since 1997. How about these Nivkh people? I suppose they're Russian citizens, but does Russia have any laws protecting these minority groups?
The big difference is that, Ainu is almost the only non-Japanese ethnicity, indigenous people, not really Japanese. Russia has much more indigenous people. The whole Siberia has been populated by non-Russian people, of course. But if you look back at the history of Russia, it is a bit complicated. The first movement to, maybe you can say protect, to give, for instance, orthography to the languages of these Aboriginal people, the indigenous people, started already in the 1930s. That's very early. And that has to do with the ideal of the socialism, the Soviet Union. So at that time, the Soviet government thought that every nationality, every ethnicity on the Soviet region has to have their own orthography, and they should be able to read, for instance. So it was part of a project in order to give orthography to all these the non-Russian people, including Nivkh. So in the 1930s, the program initiated already. So at that time, many languages received their own orthography, and the Nivkh language was also taught in schools, for instance. Unfortunately, this didn't last for a long time. In 1940s, oh sorry, nice picture of my that policy changed with the rise of Stalin's. When Stalin came to a mighty person in Russian politics, the policy changed from assimilating the non-Russian people to the Russians. So there was no longer teaching of the non-Russian language to the non-Russian people like you. The children were forced to learn Russian, and that continued for a very long time. And in the 1980s, in the early 1980s, then there was again a change. And then the Soviet government decided to do more to the non-Russian people in Russia, including Korean, for instance. So at that time, the Russian government allowed to teach Nivkh people Nivkh in the schools. But in 1980, that was already very late. At that time, the language shift in Russia has completed many ethnicities, including Nivkh. So it came too late, and nowadays Nivkh is taught in 2-3 schools in Sakhalin. But again, because the language shift has already been completed, it's of very limited use, because children don't really want to learn Nivkh, and the parents also don't want to children learn Nivkh. Instead, they want their children to learn English so that they can be get a better job in Russian society, or better Russian, of course. So yeah, the Russian policy has been changing for ages, and the result is that, like in Japan, in Hokkaido, the language shift has been completed for many ethnic groups in Russia as well.
Okay. But this education of the Nivkh language in schools is government sponsored?
It's government sponsored, and the textbooks are also published by the Russian government. But many cultural events, like festivals, are sponsored by actually by oil majors, because many oil giants such as Shell or Exxon are exploiting oil in Sakhalin.
How many generations have been bilingual in Nivkh and Russian?
How many? Yeah, that's a good question.
Until when was it still common for people to grow up monolingually for their entire life?
I can only say that I met one monolingual, but that was already some 12 years ago. I think at least 2 generations. Yeah, they are no longer monolinguals. Yeah.
I read somewhere that a number of 40 or so people moved to Hokkaido some decades ago. Do you know something about those people?
That's also a very difficult question to answer. At the time when the war ended, the Second World War, the Ainu people emigrated to Japan, the Sakhalin Ainu people to Hokkaido. And with these Ainu people, also part of the indigenous people of Sakhalin, like Uilta or Nivkh, a small number of these people emigrated to Japan. And from Uilta, we know that there is a Uilta society in Japan, which is active in Sapporo and Akashi. And there were still Uilta people. But the Nivkh people, they have disappeared, actually. We don't know any traces. Yeah. But it's a very frequent asked question when we receive people from Russia. Are there still people living? But we don't know. Nobody knows.
Are you the only researcher doing research on the Nivkh people and language?
I have 3 other colleagues in Japan. There is one researcher, Russian researcher in Helsinki doing also, and one in Germany, in Cologne. Okay. But there are, I think, not 10. From 5 to 10, I would say. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for.
I'll be the whole year until next September. It's my sabbatical term here. So if you have questions or comments, please mail me. I am on the LUCL. Oh no, I'm not on the list. But I'm by the opleiding Engels on the first floor. So.